Hello, I am H&H Studios, and welcome to Nauru, the Forgotten Island. Today, I will outline how one small island northeast of Australia, in the southwest Pacific, was at the attention of the Third Reich during World War II. Nauru is located 57.49 kilometers south of the equator, at the coordinates -0.517 degrees south and 166.933 degrees east. Prior to World War I, the island was a German-occupied and governed island considered part of the German Marshall Islands. When Nauru was under German occupation, the island was known as Island Nawodo. Nauru, since 1906, has been a large phosphate miner and exporter until 2000, although some small mining operations are still in progress today. After the outbreak of World War I, a small Australian force was sent to the island to occupy it and removed most of the German nationals. In the year 1920, the island became a mandated territory of the League of Nations. A version of this still exists today, the United Nations. Australia, Britain, and New Zealand were the responsible authorities, however, Australia administered the island. The island in World War II was governed and under the protection by Australia and its army. On December the 6th of 1940, two German commerce raiders, Orion and Comet, accompanied by Kulmerland, arrived off the coast of Nauru. The ships previously had been laying mines and attacking Allied shipping in the Indian Ocean. The three ships, which were disguised as Japanese transport ships, Japan at the time was a neutral country, the three ships easily attacked and destroyed 5 British, Australian, and Norwegian ships using naval guns and torpedoes within the space of less than 48 hours. After causing the remaining shipping to flee, Robert Ison, the commander of the Comet, planned for a landing party with the intention of them to destroy the phosphate facilities on the island. However, high winds and rough seas prevented the idea, and it was scrubbed. After the unsuccessful attempted landing, Comet reappeared at dawn 2 days after Christmas off the coast of Nauru. Just before 7 a.m., the Comet shelled the island, targeting the harbour, its facilities, and the loading dock. The Comet shelled the island for an hour using its artillery of 6 15-centimeter naval guns, then withdrew and sailed towards the Indian Ocean. The attack raged by Comet on Nauru caused major damage to the phosphate loading facilities and disrupted exportation of phosphate for several months. Due to the attack on Nauru's port and the phosphate facilities, Australia suffered a major fertilizer shortage, eating into the agricultural output. Japan, which was not yet engaged with the Allies, suffered from the German attack on Nauru and its port as well. Japan depended on Nauru's phosphate and were angered by that Nazi ships had engaged with hostiles whilst under the Japanese flag. Tokyo was so angered by the attack and its circumstances that it filed a complaint to the Führer in Berlin. Japanese diplomats threatened to scale back the relations with the new Tripartite alliance because of the disruption. On the 22nd of August in 1942, 18 Japanese planes bombed Nauru. That same night, the Japanese cruiser Ariake shelled the island from approximately 3 kilometers off the coast of the island. Japanese troops arrived 4 days later and took control of the island with 100 troops. The Japanese occupiers transported the majority of the western population to internment camps scattered across the Pacific, and strengthened the local workforce with laborers from China, Korea, and other countries. Phosphate mining was dramatically increased, as well as strip mining. Workers and laborers were forced to build an airstrip and numerous defensive fortifications. Living conditions on Nauru were appalling under the Japanese occupation. Hundreds of natives were forcibly moved on to neighboring islands in the Pacific. However, the Japanese were inhumane towards the Chinese workers, as the Japanese considered them to be below human. Numerous numbers of laborers were worked and beaten to death. During the 25th of March in 1943, approximately 15 American B-24 Liberators, from the United States Army Air Force, USAF, bombed the airstrip, and in the process, 8 bombers and 7 fighter planes of the Japanese Navy were destroyed. In way of retaliation to the bombing, Japanese troops slaughtered the 5 Australians that had remained on the island after the invasion. Multiple air raids followed. As the Allies began to control the Pacific, Japanese high command found it impossible to resupply the island of Nauru, and by 1944 the labourers and soldiers began to starve. After Japan's surrender on 2nd of September 1945, the occupying troops still remained on the island with no way of leaving. Australian troops finally arrived in mid-September to reclaim the island, and the Japanese surrendered without incident.